We're here at the VMware Public Sector Innovation Summit, and I'm joined by Major Christopher Olsen, Military Deputy in the Office of the Chief Software Officer in the U.S. Air Force. Major Olsen, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. I'm really excited for our conversation. I want to start today with how you see your agency's constituents benefiting from the adoption of a government-owned/managed baseline DevSecOps platform.
Yeah, so what we want to do is, what we want to prevent is, say you have program A and they're spending their money to develop this DevSecOps platform, and then you have program B who's also spending their money to develop a DevSecOps platform, and those two platforms are 90% the same technical solution. That's not a great use of taxpayer funds or our limited resources in the Air Force. So what we want to do is take that 90% solution, make that an enterprise service that's available to all of the program offices and software factories in the Air Force, so that they can spend their limited resources developing mission capabilities that will actually help the warfighter and not reinvesting in platform work that's really just overhead cost. And so that's the idea, and we do that through our Platform One program. They're the ones who provide that enterprise DevSecOps platform. I heard a good analogy recently that kind of can drive it home for maybe the less technical audience is, if I'm a combatant commander and I need to get supplies from the CONUS from the United States to the area of operations overseas, we have a capability for that. One of them is called the C5 Galaxy. It's a huge airplane. You can put tanks in it. You can put other helicopters. It's massive. And so you can load it up with whatever supplies you need from the United States and get them into the theater. So you might say, like, Chris, what does that have to do with DevSecOps? Well, our platform is the C5. What we don't want is every combatant commander across the world to say, I need to get supplies from the United States to my area of operations. What I'll do is I'll start a program to build a cargo plane. Don't do that. We already have that. The cargo plane exists. Just use the one that we have. But what goes along with that is, if you think about like a C5, there's a cost associated with it. It's not free, so you have to have an air crew to run it, you have to have maintainers, you have to have a supply chain. There's a whole ecosystem around the C5, and it's similar with our enterprise platform. So that it takes a certain amount of centralized funding to keep the platform running, but in the end, for the Air Force as an enterprise, it's cheaper to do that once and reuse it many times than to keep building it over and over again.
So Major Olsen, how do you see the public sector agencies taking more innovative approaches to software modernization to include cybersecurity in 2022?
Yeah, so, from where I sit in the Chief Software Office, I see that the public sector, and specifically the Department of the Air Force, is kind of coming around to where the commercial sector has been for maybe 10, 12 years, understanding that in the modern era, the only way to do software and IT is Agile and DevSecOps. We've realized that this idea of, I'm going to develop a 5-year plan for my project, and I'm going to know exactly how much it's going to cost, how many people I'm going to need, and exactly what I'm going to deliver in the end, and it's going to be what the warfighter wants at the end, we have 30 years of evidence to show that that's not a great way of doing business. And so we're going to come around, and we're finally starting to embrace the idea that the way you get working software, the way you get working IT is small, rapid sprints. Get something into the hands of the user immediately, have those tight user feedback loops, and you iterate from there. And as far as the security aspect goes, probably not a surprise to this audience, but we're learning that security can't be bolted on at the end. That's never going to work. You can't develop your system and then hand it over to the security team and say, okay, make sure it's secure. That is a recipe for disaster and rework, and in the end, you're going to field an unsecure system. So we need to get security even before the first line of code is written. When we're talking software development, the security team needs to be there with the developers and the IT operators. That's why we call it DevSecOps.
So talent is often a major challenge in all of this across IT sector. So how do you see digital workforce enablement helping agencies improve how they attract and retain skilled employees?
Well, I think like a lot of businesses and government organizations are finding out, as terrible as COVID was, it really was kind of a forcing function to make some of these large institutions, very set in their ways, kind of do the remote work, telework experiment. And what they found over the course of COVID is that hey, it can work. And so not only are they seeing that, hey, there's a huge cost-saving implication here from facility standpoint, like if I can have my people telework more than 50% of the time, I can reduce my desk footprint by 50%, and I can save a lot of money not having to lease buildings somewhere else. I can use my government buildings only. So that's one piece. But the other piece is that we can say, hey, we no longer have to go out and try to find talent and convince them to move to Washington, D.C. or Dayton, Ohio, or wherever the installation is. We can actually say, hey, you're in Colorado, that's great. We'd love to have your talent on the team, and you don't even have to move. And so, we have a challenge in the DoD, federal government at large, in that we already are kind of at a disadvantage with the pay we can provide. So the private sector can always pay more than we can for these really highly sought after technical positions. And so when we can be flexible with work hours, with work location, that does give us an advantage and bring us back into the competition space. And it also, and our other selling point is we can say, hey, you get to come work with us, you get to do things and work on missions that you may not get to ever have the chance to work on in the private sector. And so, yeah, I think the adding in the telework, adding in the remote work, and then the last piece I'll add, our Chief Information Officer, Ms. Knausenberger, she likes to say we're migrating from looking at IT as a cost center to IT as a competitive advantage. And part of that competitive advantage is not just on the customer side, but on the people who are delivering the capabilities. Your top tier talent, they want to work with modern tools, modern technologies. They do not want to watch the blue circle on their desktop whenever they're trying to do their work.
So culture is another barrier, and as we close out, I want to address that. Culture change is repeatedly identified by business leaders as one of the biggest barriers to digital transformation. How do you see the public sector addressing the culture change problem?
Yeah, it is a big problem, especially when you think about an organization as large as the Department of the Air Force. There's a lot of, call it institutional inertia to overcome. And so I think, my personal opinion is that the senior leadership beating the drum, spreading the message, that helps. It's a necessary condition for the transformation, but it's not sufficient. It kind of takes that message coming from the top, but it also has to kind of bubble up organically from the bottom. And so I think the change kind of starts in these small pockets of excellence. It's what we're seeing in the Department of the Air Force software ecosystem. You see a team like, many people have heard of Kessel Run and the great work they do with the providing warfighting applications for the Air Operations Center. That started as kind of a small team of change agents, rogue individuals that said, hey, the government, we do have the talent and the expertise to do DevSecOps organically, and we can deliver these applications of value. And other organizations kind of saw that. It gained the attention of senior leadership. It gained the attention of Congress and the public. And so they say, how do I get that kind of attitude? How do I get that kind of transformation into my organization? And when you have your kind of like mid-level management asking that question, I think that's when you've really hit the inflection point.
Major Olsen, fantastic conversation. And once again, thanks so much for joining us at the Public Sector Innovation Summit.
Thank you for having me.